Hi, I'm Jocelyn Hurley, and this week in public law, we talked about constitutional interpretation, utilizing literalism, modernism, or originalism. And just to give a brief definition of them before I jump into my topic, originalism is looking at what the framers intended back in the 1700s, and so not really thinking about today, but thinking about how they would have wanted it. Literalism is exactly what you think. It's the exact text and how to interpret that. And then modernism is utilizing how the framers would have intended it for today. So I thought the main example that I think that blends modernism and originalism is the Fourth Amendment and the idea of unreasonable search and seizure, because unreasonable search and seizure was written in the 18th century, way before technology. No cell phones, no cars, no nothing, no internet or anything like that. And phones now are like the lifeline of society. You can't treat a phone like a physical document, but it has so much data, photos, medical information, location information, financials, and overall just like private information that you don't really want leaked out into the world. So if you're being arrested, or if the police have a warrant for your house, does that give them the justified excuse to search your phone? Personally, I think that a phone is a whole separate entity, and the framers, if you use the originalistic approach, the framers would have intended your private information and private documents to have only been searched if they had a warrant for that. So if they have a warrant for your house, they can't go searching in your drawers, and they can't go searching in your phone because that's not your house. They can only look at what's clear to view. So when you combine the two ideas and approaches when analyzing the Fourth Amendment and technology, the founders had a concern and wanted to protect private information and documents. And so in this day and age, your phone is the main resource for that. Therefore, the police, I believe, and probably the framers would have believed, is that they cannot search your phone without a warrant. Now, the warrants are very interesting to me because it's such a process and it's such a hassle for the police to like have a judge finalize it and then actually execute it and go to that person's house. But in situations like they're chasing someone and that person goes into a house, do they have the right to search that house? Well, if they're searching for the person and they stumble upon illegal contraband, can they submit that as evidence? That's where it gets a little complicated, but I find it really interesting. And so I think that that's definitely a modern example as to how constitutional interpretation is in today's world, especially with the Fourth Amendment. I think another argument can be cruel and unusual punishment, because the Constitution is so vague. And I think the framers did that on purpose because they knew that society was going to expand. They knew that it was going to get more complex and have millions of more people relying on that document. But I don't think they realized how complex it was going to get with technology, with cars, transportation in general, planes, and just the overall how we live day to day compared to how they did. So I don't think that they really thought about that clearly, and I think that reflects to today. It's not a generally outdated document, but there are definitely some things, like the amendment, I think it's the Third Amendment, where soldiers can't enter your house. That was for the Revolutionary War and wars back then, when soldiers could just enter and be allowed a place to stay. Obviously, that's not going to happen today. I don't really see a scenario where someone would need to do that. So stuff like that for the Constitution, I think, should be updated and shouldn't be taken at such an approach of analyzing and interpreting it, because it's just not relevant to today. It doesn't really mean anything. But those are my thoughts, especially when it comes to the Fourth Amendment and how it blended originalism and modernism. And yeah, I hope that you enjoyed.